not only do we have a healthy supply of gloves, but we also have a wonderful team of our OR clinicians, as well as sales reps that are educated and trained in the latex-free conversions. And that will really tailor the conversion to your facility.
Clock in, scrub up, and join us behind the red line. You're listening to First Case, a perioperative podcast bringing you exciting interviews, engaging discussions, and innovative solutions that are changing the way patients receive surgical care. Each episode, we talk to frontline staff, perioperative leadership, and nursing entrepreneurs from across the country as they share their stories, experience, and expertise on the industry we love. From the back table to the boardroom, from wheels in to wheels out, we tackle the real-life issues affecting the OR. Whether you're tuning in for surgical service education or inspiration, we're glad you're here. And now it's time to roll back and start the first case.
On today's Vendor Spotlight, we are going to be speaking with Dr. Rosemary Sergakis, Global Medical Science Lead for the U.S. with Cardinal Health. And we're going to be talking about the benefits of moving to latex-free surgical gloves in your facility. And maybe you think it's going to be a difficult thing to do if you haven't done it already, but Rosemary is going to tell us why it's important and how easy it is to accomplish. Melanie, I'm excited. I've been waiting for this one.
I have too. This one's been in the works for a while, and I'm glad that we're finally getting to have this conversation. And this is one the latex conversation is one that comes up on an almost daily basis in an OR. If you are not in a latex-free OR already, then you have patients who come in and you find out that they have a latex allergy, or you yourself have a latex allergy or are finding out that you are developing one. And so addressing the latex concerns and doing it in a way that is safest for us, safest for our patients. But then also we find out that's also in a way that's even better for the environment. I'm really excited to have her tell us more about the gloves.
All right, stay with us. We're going to be right back with Rosemary after a short break.
A 17 Studios production. You're listening to First Case.
Today, we have the pleasure of speaking with Dr. Rosemary Sergakis, Global Medical Science Lead for the U.S. with Cardinal Health. We're going to be having a very important conversation about moving towards latex-free gloves in your facility. I think we've seen latex-free gloves in all walks of healthcare, but today's conversation is going to be very specific to the operating room where form and fit, feel, function is incredibly important, and Melanie will testify to this, I'm sure. But Rosemary, thanks so much for coming on the show.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
So before we dive into, your experience with latex-free gloves and helping facilities kind of make that conversion successfully, can you just talk about your extensive background in the industry?
Certainly. And this is one of my favorite topics because my experience has been in the operating room and using gloves all the time and having to wash my hands. So this is a real passion for me. Another thing that I think will really help is that we have a lot of best evidence as to what we should be doing in the industry. And that's research that's been conducted by PhDs. And my doctorate is actually in nursing practice. And so that means I take the information that the PhDs have found to be the best evidence and get it into practice. So this is something I'm very excited to participate in and let the viewers know that there is an option for you out there.
I love that experience about putting it into practice, especially when you're providing support for like a conversion, right? Like a lot of that change management experience comes into play and just helping people go through that, right? Like that's got to be something that you did a lot of learning on and through your schooling.
Yes, but it's also kind of just an experience with people. People don't like to change until you explain the why. And actually, let them know that there is a better way of doing things as well. And just because these are the gloves that you've been given, there are other gloves out there that you can ask for. And that makes the change a lot easier to know that there's something that's actually looking out for me and my health.
Well, I'll tell you, you talk to anybody in supply chain and they'll tell you that doing a glove conversion is one of the ones that will get you the most feedback from the clinicians on the front line. Like, we are all very opinionated. I know all three of us are nurses, very opinionated about gloves. And so we're going to tell everybody about why this is a lot easier than they think it might be and why it's also so important in a couple of minutes. But specifically around this latex-free movement in the operating room, can you give us some background on the company and why this is so important to Cardinal?
Absolutely. Cardinal Health is one of the key pioneers in the latex-free movement. Our Protexis surgical gloves are the market leader in polyisoprene surgical gloves, and we are committed to the health and well-being of clinicians and their patients and believe that minimizing the OR's exposure to latex is an impactful change that we can make towards supporting their health and well-being.
Well, I'll tell you, the very first surgery that I ever had the pleasure of watching was on a 13-year-old with spina bifida. And one thing I learned in working at a camp for children with disabilities, many of them with spina bifida, was that the incidence of a latex allergy with, children and adults with spina bifida was pretty high. And I think before that, I wasn't really aware of latex allergies, but you mentioned something that I thought was really important, the well-being of not only the patients, where we might, have an awareness of, an allergy like that, but also staff and how those allergies can creep up over time. Can you talk about maybe some statistics related to latex allergies and why this is even an increasing concern over time?
Absolutely. Latex allergies are on the rise, and up to about 12% of our healthcare workers are affected by latex sensitivities. Operating room staff have an increased chance of developing a latex allergy due to repeat exposure to latex. And then actually more than 20% of healthcare workers know a colleague who was unable to perform their duties due to a latex sensitivity. And unfortunately, not only does that cost personally because you're not able to show up and do the job that you want to do and may not even be able to work at all that day, depending on how severe the reaction is. It also costs in revenue for facilities, and they're estimating that at about $10,000 for each patient who suffers a latex reaction or OR staff member.
I think I don't know. I've been in healthcare for a long time, been in the OR for 12 years, and I don't think I ever really connected that I could still develop a latex allergy now, even though I don't have one necessarily. I've recently gone back into clinical practice, back into the OR, and the OR that I'm working in, I haven't been wearing latex-free gloves. And I was actually looking at my hands on the way home today, and they are terrible. They're already breaking out. There's redness. There's stuff on my hands that really could be from exposure to latex and things that we just take, it's just my dry skin, or it's just being dried out from all the alcohol rub or whatever. But it's interesting to think that you can develop that over time and you just don't realize it.
Absolutely. And there's even studies that have shown that 50% of surgeons have latex allergies.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
I don't even think they realize it, probably, do they?
No, and I think too, as healthcare workers, we're not really good at scheduling time to go in and see what actually that is. Is it dry hands or is it a latex allergy that is developing? We just keep on going, and there's another patient to see and another person to be cared for.
You said latex allergy developing. So I'm thinking there's a continuum here. A lot of times when people think of latex allergy, we always think of the worst case scenario, right? Which is an anaphylactic reaction and all of a sudden the airway is compromised and we've got to stabilize the patient. But are there a lot of other signs that maybe people should be paying attention to as you talk about this, like emerging one? Like, everybody's a little bit different, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, you cannot really predict how you're going to respond, but Melanie started with it, the dry, the itchiness. You may have watery eyes and you're not even thinking about it, or you may attribute it to something else. So whether you go into a full anaphylactic shock versus Melanie with just dry, itchy hands, you can't tell. And you bring up the spina bifida patient that you knew about. That's actually one of the highest ones for developing an allergy because it often requires repeated surgeries. And that's also what we're finding, just normal people who go in for surgery. But if it's anything over 5 or 6 surgeries, they're at risk for developing an allergy as well.
I don't know. I guess that's just really mind blowing to me. I just think allergies are just either you're allergic or you're not. Everything you don't necessarily develop over time.
And there's latex in the real world, right? So coming in for repeated procedures, it's not like the only exposures when you're going in for surgery.
Well, yeah, there's latex. Even in the little medicine stoppers or catheters, there's a lot of different ways that latex sneaks into an operating room or a facility.
My favorite glove in the OR, if I go to grab a glove to prep, is actually a 7 Protexis. That is what I like to wear. It's my favorite. That's what I wear when I scrub as well. So I'm very happily wearing a latex-free glove without even complaining about wearing a latex-free glove because I like the glove and it fits. But I did not know that y'all actually have this hand mold that you use when you're making this glove. Will you tell me about how you make this glove?
Absolutely. So Cardinal Health not only does the research and the production of the gloves, we have included something I think was really thoughtful in terms of how long people are in the operating room. You want a glove that fits. And so it's a hand mold. Yes, I can show it, where the thumb is relaxed. And so that way when it slides on, it's anatomically correct. And what we found over time, and why you, like many other clinicians, love our gloves, we sell over 150 million pairs annually, is because of the fit. And when you're in long surgeries, particularly, your hand does it. If you have a tighter glove and the thumb is placed differently, it contracts your hand.
It does. It gets really uncomfortable. Or I've had other latex-free gloves I've had to wear before, and I really felt like I put on a food service glove. It just didn't fit my hand. Or you're right. If it's wrong, it makes your thumb sometimes fold in or something weird and it's uncomfortable. So I do like the fit on the Protexis. I'm very partial.
What are some of the objections? I remember, not necessarily in the operating room, but I remember people kind of saying, and even myself with the early ones when I was doing my nursing career, maybe in the nursing homes, right? And they were kind of flimsy gloves and they didn't fit right. And you were kind of talking about how that hand mold really addresses that and has essentially the same feel as a latex glove. But what are some of the things that people kind of maybe it's not objections, but maybe it's like an assumption that they make about a latex-free glove that makes them resistant to change that you've kind of addressed as well, not just the way that you have the mold and having it fit comfortably, but what are some other things that you hear out there that prevent facilities or clinicians from adopting latex-free?
Well, to address your question or concern a clinician might have if they're wearing a latex glove and they like how it feels, our polyisoprene gloves are actually identical molecularly to the latex, but they don't have the protein. So we're able to offer the fit and the tactile sensitivity that you want to, the latex glove. So I don't know that necessarily people have complaints. It's just a matter of you're able to educate them. And one of the things we can also do with our gloves is that we can add a grip to them. We have several different glove styles that if you need to have a little bit more of a grippy hold for things, we're able to do that. Or if you prefer a smooth finish, we're able to do that too. So we have really, I think, well-rounded portfolio of gloves to suit any specialty. And then we have several gloves that you can use in any specialty.
So I think one thing that I was always hearing when we would have to convert, oh no, the patient has a latex allergy. We've got to use latex-free gloves, and surgeons and staff, they would complain if we didn't have a certain type of glove that they really liked, or suddenly it's a different brand and we're using latex-free and they said it was a different size or it didn't fit right or didn't feel right or they couldn't, the sensitivity was different. I think you bring up a good point about getting rid of those objections by just letting people try them on. Tell them the science behind it, that this really is no different. You might think that about a latex-free glove, but until you've tried it on, you don't actually know. And I mean, going back to my own absolute love of a 7 Protexis, it really doesn't feel any different. It fits. It's the same size. It works. But those objections really can be put to bed very quickly if people just get to have a trial.
Yeah, and those are my favorite objections, really, is when someone says, oh, absolutely not. And you're like, oh, just try it. Yeah. And I think that's part of the change mentality. They sometimes do it begrudgingly. Sometimes they actually don't even know what glove that they are wearing. They put on what the facility offers them. And so when you give them an opportunity, say in a glove trial, they're able to get exactly the size that they want. We can double glove. We have a, wonderful polyisoprene underglove that's light and it has an emollient on it. It's super easy to double glove. You're complying with best evidence and what's recommended by numerous associations as what we should be doing today. So there's so many things that if you take the time to have a glove trial or even ask, in materials or your manager or nursing director, what are the options with Protexis gloves? I would really like to try them. And I think you'll be nicely surprised your objections go away.
Yeah, absolutely. And I also think too, as a side note, if you go through all the time and the effort of a trial and you do all of this work and your surgeons and your staff, but your surgeons, because we write their preferences down. So if your surgeons are going through and they're trying on these gloves and we're finding out what size is theirs, what size they like, then go ahead and get that changed on their preference card. So that as soon as you've made this rollout and you've changed it, you're opening the proper gloves and suddenly they don't get handed an 8.5 when they really needed a 9 or whatever. And then it feeds into this idea that's incorrect when really it was just that we didn't give them the right size. So like making those changes immediately, I think also helps put some of the objections, I guess, to rest.
Absolutely.
Yeah, like really setting it up for success. And, I think you said, was it 150 million pairs of gloves annually? Is that what you said?
So many gloves.
Yes.
So that's a lot of gloves, and it definitely supports the statement at the beginning that you were really being a pioneer. At this point, though, like put this into context as far as like how far you've been able to really change people's minds in the industry and make this necessary change. What percentage of all the gloves that you sell are latex free at this point?
75%.
Oh, so that's a sizable number. So, if somebody's listening to this and they haven't gone to latex free, I think that's a really convincing stat. 75% of gloves that are sold by Cardinal Health are latex free now. This is a movement that many, many institutions have clearly adopted. That's phenomenal. So the conversion is always the biggest concern though, right? And you talked about your experience and really putting things into practice. And so one thing you told us as we were preparing for the interview was that you have a whole conversion team that helps make this process easy. So that's the other thing, right? Is if you've got one champion and they're doing it on their own, they might feel like that's a really daunting task. And I think hospitals and healthcare organizations, especially over the past 3 and 4 years around the pandemic, have been looking for more support from their partners and where they get their products and services from to help them. Can you talk about this conversion team where you can really take on a lot of that lift and help ensure not only that it's set up for success ongoing, but that the process goes really well?
Absolutely. An important part of being in healthcare is building trust and resiliency. So not only do we have a healthy supply of gloves, but we also have a wonderful team of our OR clinicians as well as sales reps that are educated and trained in the latex-free conversions. And that will really tailor the conversion to your facility. It's not just cookie cutter. We take a look at what you're doing in your facility and how we can either reduce the number of SKUs to help save money, because you have a lot of gloves that, people think that they want from various, education or training that they've had. But you can find a glove within our portfolio. As I said, we have several different gloves that can be used really in any specialty. So we tailor it to the facility and make sure that, we're answering questions in terms of what they're looking for.
So one of the big things I mentioned, if you ever talk to anybody in supply chain, they'll tell you a glove conversion can be, a daunting task. And I think you've really set everybody at ease talking about the conversion team and several other things. Yeah. But sustainability is another huge topic in supply chain. And I think, the operating room is getting more and more exposure. And we've had a number of interviews on this podcast to help break down the silos. They've heard a lot more about supply chain and how that impacts their day-to-day lives. And I think sustainability is that buzzword now in supply chain, but it has a big impact because you've started to see all kinds of substitutions, in the operating room for different products. And it's because of availability and raw materials. And so can you talk about, the sustainability of the latex-free gloves?
I would love to. First of all, just in terms of the boxes themselves that the gloves come in, they're much smaller. So we're using a lot less material. We're taking up a lot less space in the ever shrinking supply closet or room or central stair or wherever you have things tucked away in nooks and crannies. So our boxes are really good, not only that it's less material, but it also takes up less space. Our glove wrappers, they're recycled. And so there's a lot of benefits to just even, with transporting smaller items and recycling. And really that's something Cardinal Health has been very interested in terms of sustainability, biodegradable things and recycling to really help make an impact.
Okay, so you piqued my interest talking about a glove wrapper that is made out of recyclable materials. So I just kind of have to know, what's it made out of?
So 95% of the recycled paper surgical glove inner wallets or wrappers are made from recyclable and renewable paper sources, including machine glazed paper and crepe paper.
That's really cool. I think it's neat to have something you don't think about a wrapper, but even a glove wrapper can be made out of more sustainable sources. And I think that's really cool.
Thank you.
Yeah, it's a big movement in the industry. It has been for a while, and sustainability has kind of taken on this broader definition now too, with just the availability of products and the supply chain. But I do love sustainability in the maybe more traditional sense, is the environmental impact and, how do we reuse materials and products. So just kudos to you all for thinking about that, even in the packaging, not just in the manufacturing of the actual product being used, but in the packaging itself. So I have this quote that I want to read from Dr. Zura, a board certified orthopedic surgeon and an advisor to Cardinal Health Surgical Gloves, who partnered with you on a journal. And in that, he stated, choosing synthetic surgical gloves can help avoid potential allergic reactions to latex, such as itchy skin, rashes similar to poison ivy, sneezing, there's one you might not think of, and a runny nose, and in some cases, anaphylaxis. In fact, one of the main concerns with using powdered surgical gloves, which led to their ban, was that they caused the aerosolization of latex. That is an interesting fact that I had absolutely no idea. We talk about aerosols all the time, especially in the operating room environment, but I never thought about the aerosolization of latex. That is a concept totally new to me.
And something very interesting as well is that the proteins from the latex gloves can linger for hours. And that's why, you always want to have time in between if somebody does have a latex allergy, because the particles can hang around and then fall down during the night and create an issue.
Wow. Yeah, I know we do like a lot of air exchanges in that environment, but if it can linger or even settle and then be blown up again, obviously a concern there. I do want to tell everybody how they can learn some more before we give you some final thoughts here, Rosemary, but they can reach out to Cardinal Health at 800-321-0591. You can also visit cardinalhealth.com/surgical gloves. So that'll get you right to the page on the Cardinal website where you can learn more about their Protexis synthetic polyisoprene and neoprene surgical gloves and how the facility that you work can go latex free. Very easy with that conversion team. Rosemary, any final thoughts you want to add to the conversation before we wrap up?
Well, I just wanted to say thank you, and I really appreciate you letting everyone know that we do have a team. All they have to do is ask for us to come in, and we'll help you find the gloves that you need.
All right. Very important topic. I love educating on ways to just make patients and staff, always got to emphasize, and staff safer in the operating room. Thanks so much for coming on.
Thank you.
That was Dr. Rosemary Sergakis, Global Medical Science Lead for the U.S. at Cardinal Health. And Melanie, we're just having a really good conversation about moving towards latex-free gloves. And honestly, this has been a pretty hot topic for 20 to 25 years. But I would say movement, especially in the operating room, has been somewhat difficult. To now learn that 75% of the gloves that are sold by Cardinal Health are latex free. We've come a long way in 20 to 25 years, but still I know there are many operating room nurses, scrub techs, surgeons, etc., listening to this podcast that are very much using latex gloves on a regular basis and may not have even known that there was an alternative out there that would reduce exposure, not only to them, but their patients. And I just had no idea about the aerosolization of latex and that these allergies were actually on the rise. I thought it was we just didn't know about them as much or pay attention, but they're actually increasing.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting, which I guess makes sense because you think surgical cases are on the rise, surgical volume is on the rise, so we are doing more and more cases, so there's more and more exposure. But I mean, I'm an OR nurse. I know I don't like to change. I can say that for me and admit that for the rest of the OR nursing population as well. We don't like change. But I think that Rosemary did a really good job of addressing the objections that we normally would have if we are holding our latex gloves, in our hands and like, we're not going to change. But there's actually really good reasons to change, obviously, for exposure and risk and for our patients and everything else. But also the equivalent that's latex free is going to feel just the same. You just have to do a trial and find out what fits. And I think a lot of those objections can be addressed. So this was just a very enlightening conversation all the way around.
Well, remember, they've got a conversion team that's going to make it really easy on you. And if you want to learn more or connect with somebody on that team, you can just call Cardinal Health at 1-800-321-0591. And if you're curious and want to learn more, just go to cardinalhealth.com/surgical gloves. And there you'll have all the information on the Protexis synthetic polyisoprene and neoprene surgical gloves and how you can realistically and seamlessly go latex free. So great interview today. Rosemary has extensive experience, really impressive. We're going to have her back on another show, Melanie. I enjoyed it quite a bit. I do want to remind everybody the best way to listen to us is on our smartphone app for iPhone and Android. If you haven't checked out our new website, go to firstcasemedia.com. We revamped it about 6 months ago, but you might just be listening to the podcast. So while I have your ears, I'd love to point you over and have some eyes on all of the great content that we've put on that new website, including many of our experts on the expert series that you're seeing us post on social media. And speaking of social media, I'm sure you're already following us, but are you liking and engaging the posts? Have you heard something on the First Case podcast that has had an impact on your daily practice, or maybe opened your eyes to something that you think others in the industry need to be aware of? We would love it if you would find the post for the podcast, or maybe it's a social media post that Melanie's put out there to draw awareness, we would love it if you would comment, and even better, share that out. And you can certainly message Melanie or I directly on LinkedIn, but another great way to reach us is by email. Send it to info@firstcasemedia.com. And on behalf of Melanie and myself, thanks for listening to this Vendor Spotlight on First Case.